In 2019, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed won the Nobel Peace Prize for ending decades of hostilities with neighboring Eritrea. If war does break out with Eritrea, should Abiy give his Nobel Peace Prize back?
What happens when a Nobel Peace Prize winner reverses the very peace that he was awarded for? Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was awarded the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize primarily for one thing, that is, for making peace with Eritrea, and to be specific, for signing the Algiers Agreement that recognized Eritrea's sovereignty, promised to end what was then about 20 years of hostility. Now, today, the very man, the very prime minister talks about undermining Eritrea's independence, claiming the ownership of the port of Assab, which rightly belongs to Eritrea, and Ethiopia's natural and rightful access to the coast, which very much contradicts what he agreed and what he signed for. Now, the peace deal that was supposed to turn page for the two nations never materialized, essentially. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been using the Nobel Peace Prize, his reputation as a peacemaker, to wage wars within Ethiopia, several civil wars, and then, of course, with Eritrea, to use it as a diplomatic shield to actually reverse what he signed for, and in some cases, even make the situation more dangerous and worse. So the question is not whether the Nobel Peace Prize can be revoked or not. We know it won't. The real question is, was it deserved in the first place? And also, how can we prevent peace laureates like Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed from shielding themselves diplomatically or using their peacemaker reputations to actually make situations worse? Then, more importantly, how should we look at the Prime Minister, the Nobel Peace Prize, going forward? I will explain. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the program. So let's start with the facts. The Nobel Committee said Abiy was awarded the prize, quote, in particular for his decisive initiative to resolve the border conflict with Eritrea. In particular, not for economic reforms, not for national reconciliation, even though some of this was mentioned, not for political openness. All these things were mentioned, but in particular, it was his decisive initiative to resolve the conflict with Eritrea. That's what they said. Now, the core reason for his acceptance was, as I mentioned before, is the Algiers Agreement. So we will delve into that a little bit. Now, by extension, the EEBC, once the agreement was signed in 2000, the Algiers Agreement, the Eritrea-Ethiopia Border Commission actually made its ruling. So essentially, it's actually the EEBC ruling that he accepted that earned him the international recognition. Now, we can call this the legal foundation, because if you take that away, there is no prize. There is nothing to award. That is the very reason he was awarded. That was also the diplomatic breakthrough that he made possible. Of course, you don't dance by yourself in the situations. He didn't do this by himself, but he made the breakthrough. Peace was achieved, which basically said the Ethiopia-Eritrea border, after conflict that costed a lot of lives and a lot of loss in human and capital, and very devastating war between 1998 to 2000, it ended with this ruling. Basically, it was final and binding. It was supposed to end then, for some reason or another, for about 18 years. For the following 18 years, Ethiopia refused to implement what it accepted then. History actually is now repeating itself. But what did Abiy Ahmed say to have this diplomatic breakthrough that pleased everyone, including Eritrea, that gave hope to the people of Eritrea, that gave hope to the people of the region, the people of Ethiopia, is that he openly said, I accept the Algiers Agreement, no questions asked. it was supposed to be final and binding anyway, but he says, well, from here on, we are not going to beat around the bushes and drag you into a wild goose chase. We will accept the EEBC ruling. That was the breakthrough. Everything that transpired after that was to formalize his acceptance of the acceptance. Again, if we go back to the Algiers Agreement of 2000, that's between the Prime Minister Meles Zenawi and President Isaias Afwerki, with a lot of witnesses and guarantors. That was supposed to end then. So again, as a reminder, what the Prime Minister agreed on and was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize was for accepting this Algiers Agreement that was signed way back. Nothing else. So let's look into the details of what we mean by that. And in order to understand that a little better, let's look at we're not going to get into word for word what the Norwegian Nobel Committee actually said in their announcement. It's written, you can find it there, every word of it. But I'm going to focus on 3 paragraphs. In fact, 3 phrases within those paragraphs. Let's also get our timeline straight. So the Nobel Committee announcement, or the Nobel announcement, was done in 11 October 2019, but the peace deal was in 2018, a year before that. So apparently, what the Nobel Peace Committee did is study the announcement and what transpired after that within that first year. And let's go into the timeline of that, and more importantly, into the wording of what was said. But I'm going to focus on these 3 paragraphs that they wrote. Let's get into the first one. The first one talks about the one that I want to highlight again is, which is actually mentioned right here in their paragraph, in particular for his decisive initiative to resolve the border conflict with neighboring Eritrea. Now, the reason I'm here, the reason we are talking is, today, in particular, he is making a decisive decision to make the very peace that he agreed with Eritrea, to make it worse. That's the reason where we are. But to remind everyone that he was actually awarded because of that. Because a lot of people actually confuse with, because other things were mentioned. He was definitely a reformer in Ethiopia. He released prisoners and created some openness and hope and all that. And the Nobel Peace Committee also mentioned all that. But they said in particular means more or less because 80% of the reason, in addition to the other reasons. So that is one. Let's move on to the second paragraph. So the second paragraph talks about what transpired, what preceded the Nobel Peace Award announcement. They go back to when Abiy Ahmed became prime minister in April 2018. He made it clear that he wished to resume peace talks with Eritrea. It's all about these peace talks. And then in close cooperation with President Isaias Afwerki, they made a peace deal, and they made an agreement in Asmara and in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the following July and September. So it mentions those dates, and we can look at them. We'll look at them as well. And this was recognized as a prerequisite for the breakthrough because of his initiative. That was what he was being awarded for. And because his willingness, it says here, his willingness to accept the arbitration ruling of the International Boundary Commission in 2002 regarding the border between the 2 nations, between the 2 countries. Now, that 2002 Boundary Commission ruling that they are referring to is what I was referring to earlier as the EEBC, Ethiopia-Eritrea Border Commission ruling. So it is exactly because of that I was awarded for. Now, in this particular paragraph, what I want to highlight is actually the fact that they are mentioning that he signed an agreement in Asmara, Eritrea, and in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, the previous July and September. So what essentially means is, okay, if we are talking about that he is rescinding and he is reversing what he signed for, exactly what he signed, first of all, the Algiers Agreement itself, the EEBC ruling itself, but then him, because personally he took the responsibility of signing in 2018 in Asmara and in Jeddah. What he signed there is actually the reason he was awarded for. And we will look at those and examine them to see, did he actually, as I'm claiming, did he actually reverse those? Let's go to that. First comes the 9th of July 2018 agreement, the Asmara Agreement. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and President Isaias of Eritrea, they signed an agreement. And it's detailed, but the very first article, the very first thing that they were signed for, Article 1 states, the state of war between Ethiopia and Eritrea has come to an end. There was a war situation, a state of war. Now we have a peace. The state of war has ended. Now a new era of peace and friendship has been opened. Thankfully, there is no, even today, there is no declared state of war between the two countries. The whole idea is to prevent that from happening. But the new era of peace and friendship definitely hasn't. In fact, we are going in reverse, and because of what the Prime Minister's ambitious and rather dangerous way of doing things. But anyway, that was Article 1. That's what they agreed on in Asmara. Then I'm going to jump to Article 4 because just to make it relatable to the peace agreement, relatable to the award. Article 4 states that the Eritrea-Ethiopia Boundary Commission, the one that I keep referring to, the EEBC decision of the 13th of April 2002, is final and binding. Now, if something is final and binding, and the previous administrations in Ethiopia were actually not treating it as final and binding, that was the stalemate. That was the reason there was no war, no peace situation for close to 20 years. And then basically says Ethiopia will fully accept and implement the EEBC decision. Now look at the wording. It's not Ethiopia and Eritrea will fully accept and implement the decision. It was, to be specific, Ethiopia will fully accept and implement the EEBC ruling, because it was Ethiopia that was failing to accept and implement the Eritrea-Ethiopia Border Commission ruling. Now, let's move forward. And then, just to keep track of the dates, that was July, 9th of July 2018. A few months later, in September, they actually also went to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and as we will look closely, it was not a new decision or it was now a new agreement, but they expanded it. In fact, at the time, including myself, there were some of us, even though we were very pleased with what the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's bold and brave decision and the right decision and the historic decision that he took. We all applauded him for that. But there were some of us who say, well, this should be expanded. Plus, it can't be an agreement between these two warring nations that have been at it for 20 years. It needs to be expanded. There needs to be those very witnesses that were in the Algiers Agreement, the United States, the European Union, the African Union, other international bodies, maybe third-party countries should be involved. That was what we was hoping for. And the good thing is, President Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, they did not disappoint. They said they agreed to this. Yes, let's formalize this even better, because even in Ethiopia, they were criticizing the process as if he was just making this personal agreement of because the two leaders like each other, they were friendly with each other at that time. It should not be a peace agreement between two leaders or even two nations for that matter. It needs to be expanded. So that's exactly what they did, and thanks to their host, the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they went to Jeddah, and it was in the spirit of actually expanding what they signed in Asmara. But Let's look at the first three articles as related to what we are talking about today. Now, Article 1, straightforward. It says the parties shall respect each other's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. At that time, some of us even wondered, do they even need to say that? But I guess that's what a peace deal between two countries means. But the two parties shall respect each other's independence. At this time, we can say the two parties, Eritrea, respects Ethiopia's independence. At this time, Ethiopia does not respect Eritrea's independence. At this time, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed actually goes to his parliament, makes speeches, his ministers, his ambassadors, his media campaign basically is questioning the legality of Eritrea's independence. Article 1 here, Article 1 that earned him the Nobel Peace Prize. When a leader of a neighbor's country points to a report, which actually is on the coast, not even on the border, says that is rightfully ours, and it was ours from the get-go, and Ethiopia has every right to claim it, that is going against sovereignty of Eritrea. So again, he's going against Article 1, sovereignty, and not to mention territorial integrity. Independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity can't be spelled better than what we have here. But almost every word of it, he is disrespecting and discounting. Article 1. Let's move on to Article 2. Article 2 states, the parties shall refrain from the threat or use of force against each other. Today, as an Eritrean, I'm proud the Eritrean government is not in the business of doing that, other than trying to say, calm down to Ethiopia and its leaders who are actually threatening Eritrea. Literally, some of his generals are saying, one way or the other, we're going to come and get the port of Assab. And if there is a dispute between the two countries, the two shall settle all disputes between them exclusively by peaceful means. Now, the rhetoric that we hear, of course, Eritrea never went into threatening by force, so I don't think that applies much to Eritrea, but Ethiopia's rhetoric has been, at least in English, and when talking to the international community and its diplomats talk about peace and peaceful means. In Amharic and for their domestic audience in local languages, they are literally saying, we will invade Eritrea. Or for all intents and purposes, that's what they are saying when they say, you declared your independence by force, so we will use force to get it back. That's what they're saying about Assab. That's what they're saying about overall what they're trying to agitate the Ethiopian people to do. So that's Article 2. Now, Article 3 talks about the parties shall respect the boundaries existing at their independence. Can they be any more clearer at that? Now, if Ethiopia claims that its independence was 3,000 years ago, which is very laughable, it doesn't matter. Eritrea respects that, and it will and it shall. But in Eritrea's case, you can talk about 1991 or you can talk about 1993. What led to the border war to begin with was because Ethiopia did not respect the existing boundary at Eritrea's independence, which, by the way, goes with the spirit of the African Union of respecting colonial borders and what have you. But more importantly, they are literally saying, do not bother each other because you already signed the very ruling that we are signing and re-signing is something to do about delineating the border between the two countries. And if that is any confusion, they could easily have referred to the Algiers Agreement or the EEBC ruling. But they actually says, whatever was at your independence, respect each other, because it can't just apply to Eritrea. Now, any fair-minded person and anyone who has been following the news for the last couple of years can easily say, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is violating Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 of this Jeddah Agreement. Very sad, but if he did that, can he actually say he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize? Because, as I said in the beginning, what happens when a Nobel Peace Prize winner reverses the very peace that he actually was awarded for. He ushered a peace era. He made peace possible. Now, what happens when he takes that away? I'll leave that to the audience, but let's move forward. Now, what they did in Saudi Arabia, which was actually an excellent thing to do, because first of all, they expanded the wording so that nothing is lost in translation. There are many other articles as well, but if we look at the three articles, it doesn't get any better than that. I think the additional 3 or 4 other articles that were added were about cooperation, collaborating for the making security agreement, economic integration, just something that actually will reinforce what was actually the crux of the matter, which is Article 1, 2, and 3. But the one that I actually want to highlight is that once again it was witnessed and by very, very important people and international institutions, just like the year 2000, but in this case even closer to where we are today. Above all, the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, as it says here. For an agreement like this, there is no other higher official that you can bring other than the Secretary General of the United Nations. He witnessed it. So, forget about the Nobel Peace Prize for a second. As the Secretary General of the United Nations, the very Prime Minister who signed that agreement in front of him is now reversing things. And that should be very clear to the United Nations. It's not Eritrea, it's Ethiopia. But we're not talking about who is going to blame of the current situation, even though it's very clear. But the main topic is, does the Nobel Peace Prize laureate actually deserve the respect that he got then? The second person to mention here is His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Abul Gait, the Secretary General of the Arab League, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia being the main actor in the Arab League. It makes sense for the Arab League to actually give it some weight to this peace deal. I'm so glad that they were involved. As I mentioned, there were 3 paragraphs in the Nobel Peace Prize announcement, and we are now looking at the 3rd paragraph. And the 3rd paragraph basically deals with that it takes 2 to tango. Let's read a couple of sentences. Peace does not arise from the actions of one party alone. When Prime Minister Abiy reached out his hand, President Afwerki grasped it. So here they are making the acknowledgement that, yes, he made the overture, he took the initiative. He, in particular, said that he will sign the agreement with Eritrea. Under normal circumstances, by the way, the Peace Prize would have been awarded to both leaders because they are both making peace. But we will not go into the details of why today. But they said it took 2, and then they are acknowledging that President Afwerki grasped it. So they are, in a way, acknowledging his involvement. But more importantly, it is because of that handshake, it is because of the other party, Eritrea, that the Prime Minister was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So we can clearly see, again, if you read the whole statement of why he was awarded, there were other things mentioned. I think it is right that they mentioned them about the openness in Ethiopia and the reform and the peace and reconciliation that Ethiopia really badly needed then. That is fine. But if you take away the peace agreement with Eritrea, which is about 75 or 80% of what we are talking about here, there is no Nobel Peace Prize. That's my main point. Now, let's move forward. Now, so what happened? Or how can we, in the last, it's been 7 years now, what is the best way to describe what actually have happened? It's been a lot of reversal, a lot of, he probably is not the first Nobel Peace Laureate to do that, but I think his situation is even probably worse than previous controversial recipients. But the reformer, the peacemaker, the reformer for Ethiopia, Ethiopians would have their own reason for thinking that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, and they also have their own reason on why they think the Nobel Peace Prize should be revoked in their from their vantage point. But he starts acting as this ambitious conqueror. In fact, that's what some reporters start referring to him, because he's forget about making deals. He was talking about this larger Ethiopia, sometimes the one that actually incorporates not only Eritrea. In the beginning, it was actually crazier. Um, there's a great article, in fact, an opinion piece at Al Jazeera that was published then, and the headline is Abiy Ahmed's imperial ambitions are bad news for Africa and the world. And they went on to describe that what he's referring to, what he's turning into, and this was intentional, by the way. Remember, the Peace Prize was awarded in 2018. This is to 2023. He started to shift gears. That's when he started his campaign against Eritrea, campaign of this. They call it the imperial ambitions, but I call it the campaign of reversing Eritrea's independence, thereby violating everything that he agreed with. And within that, without going to details, he talks about this is, you can literally find videos and articles about this, about creating this very big country. Talk about anti-peace sentiment that includes Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia. Maybe he was being, in his own way, in a childlike, wide-eyed optimist. That's what actually a lot of us thought in the beginning. But soon it was going to be okay. He was talking about twisting arms and the right of Ethiopia, the natural right that sometimes in a mystic and religious way of why God intended it to, why history says he deserves it or Ethiopia deserves it. And then in some cases, he literally says that he will use force. Now, that is speaking in general terms of the region, of the Horn of Africa countries. But again, the peace deal, the peace agreement, or the Nobel Peace Prize was not about that. It was about Eritrea. So let's focus on that. But because he actually did that, he shielded himself as a peacemaker. That gave him the aura of respect in the international arena. And what he basically did is he weaponized that peace to launch wars within Ethiopia, civil wars, the war in Tigray and Amhara and Oromo and all other places, what have you. We are not going to go into that. And as an Eritrean, I will leave that to other Ethiopians to make the connections, how the peacemaker turned it into that. But at the end of the day, peacemaker he's not, even within Ethiopia. And then the whole spirit of the agreement, once again, let's go back to that EEBC ruling that the Nobel Peace Prize committee, the Nobel Committee actually identified, the International Boundary Commission's ruling. It never materialized to this day. So if a Nobel Peace was awarded because somebody promised that they will make it happen, and years and years and years later, they did not even touch it. In fact, a close study shows from the get-go, he kept on saying, who needs a border anyway? He literally is saying that. In his crazy Madamar ideology and a lot of interviews that he did in Asmara, sometimes in Washington, in a lot of international media, he would be quoted as saying like, the border ruling or the border demarcation or delineation is not his priority. Now, it got complicated with what was going on with all the civil wars that happened in Ethiopia, and some of it, understandably, the border war. I mean, the civil war within Ethiopia that actually borders Eritrea, because a lot of things that complicated. But if we are going to weigh in and measure, did the peacemaker bring peace? Did the peacemaker who promised implementing an international ruling, which includes the border demarcation, shouldn't we judge him by what was he able to do or not? Now, we won't blame him for not being able to do. Ethiopia is a very, very fractured country. The central government has barely control over the states, list of which actually the state that borders Eritrea. But at the same time, he can't be the respected peacemaker between Ethiopia and Eritrea and a peace laureate who actually brought peace to the region, because he didn't. And his actions, his ideology, his way of doing things, he's essentially not even believing in the very things that he was awarded for, shows you the result. Now, to make worse, because this is all about peace with Eritrea, right? After the Ethiopia's civil war, which involved Eritrea, then his army, for all intents and purposes, committed a lot of atrocities with Tigray against each other, against his fellow Ethiopians. We are talking about his air force bombing villages, his army raiding poorly or unarmed civilians. A lot of atrocious things have happened, have reportedly happened anyway. But the worst thing about this situation is that after all is said and done, this comes only lately because it's just convenient for him to do so. He's actually trying to make the Eritrea as a scapegoat of what actually happened in Ethiopia. Some talk about genocide, some talk about atrocities, some talk about horrendous situations. But at the end of the day, it's all terrible. But instead of him as a prime minister of a very large country that he's in charge of taking responsibility for a war, actually he waged, and for the diplomatic shield and respectability that he used instead of for peace, for war, once again, he's actually even taken that to the next level where he says, well, none of that is his fault. And his, in several occasions, and his minions, his followers, his diplomats talk about how Eritrea is to blame. So that's part of it too. Now, as I keep mentioning, and this is only in the last couple of years, but only getting worse and worse, not only to blame Eritrea for Ethiopia's civil wars, but at the same time, a campaign launched particularly at Eritrea, and it is essentially to delegitimize the process by which Eritrea became independent. The referendum, the everything that followed between 1991 and 1993, something that again, speaking of international community, really witnessed and respected, and to this day has zero questions about whether that should be questioned. But the very prime minister who was awarded a Peace Prize for getting over what was getting in the way, he's actually to create something artificially, something that not even the Ethiopian people seemingly are not even interested in, but he's trying to create this agitation to encourage people to start thinking about being ambitious and reversing Eritrea's independence, which could only lead to one thing: more war. So peacemaker, he's not. Warmonger, definitely he is. Now, let's go back to the crux of the matter as we wrap up. Can the Nobel Peace Prize be revoked? Is this a campaign to say, take it back and strip that away from him? I wish it was that easy, and I know, at least from what I know, it's not that easy. In fact, it all boils down to how the Norwegians, they have their own process. The simplest way for me to understand it is that, well, in 2019, he was awarded that. But 10 months later, he launched a war. Now, does it make him a peacemaker in 2020? Probably not in 2021, 22, 23, and here we are. Probably not. Maybe that's the simplest way to describe it. But at the end of the day, he's listed as, he's in a very, very short list of human beings who actually deserved the Nobel Peace Prize, because they will be forever remembered as peacemakers. So the question is, I think we just made the case that he probably did not deserve it because it wasn't earned. But what do you do at this time? Well, at least we will not let him use it as a cover to do something evil, something against peace, or as a cover, as a diplomatic cover, to actually wage wars. We won't let him do that. Let's take a quick look at a couple of examples that I can think of. Maybe there are more, but a couple of them that peace awards were given that history showed that later the vast majority of humanity thinks that maybe it's not deserved. Or let's just say it's still controversial. And one of them is the Henry Kissinger's 1973 Peace Prize that him and his North Vietnamese counterparts, they made the peace deal, and probably everybody thought Le Duc Tho deserves it, even deserved it to this day. But because of Dr. Henry Kissinger's Secretary of State at the time, and a very, very influential foreign policy, national security advisor for the United States, which a lot of people blame for the bombing in Vietnam, in Cambodia, and a lot of other places. So history shows that he may have been a great American diplomat or a defender or what have you, but peacemaker he was not. So history looks at that and goes like, no. So could Abiy Ahmed's history be something like that? That yes, a peace award or a Nobel Peace was awarded to him because of what he briefly gave the world a hint for making a peace with Eritrea. But hopefully the last chapter is not written, because he's still a leader. He can still change things. History is still unfolding in front of us. But my point is, in history, there are examples that not all peace prizes were, in hindsight, rightfully earned. Aung San Suu Kyi, she was awarded in 1991 a Nobel Peace Prize for what was then Burma, now Myanmar. She did, in fact, it was well deserved. If, as we all know, her life story and what she went through, and not only before that, but and also after. But later, the world decided, or there's enough controversy to say that, in hindsight, that she did not deserve it and it should be revoked. And there was a large campaign to do that. Now, the comparison is, it's actually it was only 25 years later that some people start questioning whether this Nobel Peace Prize was deserved, because of what her action or her lack thereof there in later years, something to do with the military government in Myanmar, that she was blamed for not taking action, and people thought, oh, maybe that should be taken back. Now, compare that to Abiy Ahmed. He was awarded the Peace Prize. Less than a year later, he, as a leader, launched a war. She, in her case, she did not have the authority to make war or peace. Abiy Ahmed did and does, and he chose the other way around. Now, again, earlier we said, can it be revoked? And we know it can't. And that's not the point of this today's message. But should it be symbolically at least condemned? Should he be condemned? Not as because the world already has condemned him several times, and a lot of international institutions and countries have done that. But I'm talking about directly related to the Nobel Peace Prize. Condemnation of the prize itself, because it wasn't deserved and it didn't materialize, and condemnation of where things are headed with the hope of preventing the next war. Otherwise, what good is the Nobel Peace Prize if it can't actually save lives? But potentially by condemning him symbolically at least, if not revoking his award. So in short, we can definitely say he betrayed the hopes of the two nations. The peace raised expectations, and then he crushed them. Now, as we move on, the international community actually has condemned him on several occasions because of his other things that Ethiopia did that he did. Unfortunately, it wasn't directly related to the items or the specific particular things that he was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for, namely peace agreement with Eritrea, recognizing Eritrea's independence, respecting Eritrea's sovereignty, fully abiding by the agreement of the Algiers Agreement, the Asmara Agreement, and the Jeddah Agreement. I haven't seen anything that actually makes him accountable for that. But at the end of the day, just to illustrate that he, on several occasions, something that you would not expect for a peacemaker to find himself in, the United Nations have documented a lot of mass atrocities within Ethiopia, a lot of his civil wars that he manages, he personally conducts. The UN has undergone a lot of investigations for violating human rights and war crimes, things like that. Repression and human rights, I'll leave that to other Ethiopians. The European Union has suspended aid against Ethiopia because of the way he does things, and all related to peace and war. Again, a domestic situation. The United States has removed Ethiopia from AGOA, something that you wouldn't expect for a country that is being led by a Nobel Peace Laureate to be under. And also, not to mention the special relationship between the United States and Ethiopia. Even given all that, because of the way he does things, he was removed. Now, as we come closer to the region, including Eritrea, something that he said and done and took steps that undermined Somali's territorial integrity, independence, and future union. He created something that destabilized Somalia. In fact, in my opinion, he continues to do that. So the Somali government made its complaint heard, and they went through a lot of mediation, and hopefully the situations keep improving. But he caused that, in fact, personally. Eritrea's security, as I keep saying, he keeps threatening that. In fact, that's probably the worst that will materialize out of all this. And even with Djibouti, supposedly one of the better relations that Ethiopia has from in the region, they formally made statements about how it grew, that it is worried about the way his ambitious Red Sea plans are, that it created not only tension, sometimes it undermined their sovereignty as well. So a peacemaker, again, he is not. Bottom line is, if this is all entire exercise is by focusing on the Nobel Peace Prize and how it affects his reputation, what are we trying to affect? I think there are three scenarios. One, if we are lucky, he could continue his. He would implement his reform and stabilize Ethiopia, and then bring peace. All best wishes to Ethiopia and him, the prime minister. That is one scenario. And in return, he starts acting like a statesman, and more importantly, he abides by all the agreements that Ethiopia did in the last 100 years. But to be specific, the Algiers Agreement, the EEBC ruling, the Asmara agreement that reinforced that, the Jeddah agreement that expanded that. As simple as saying, use common sense and say, we want peace with Eritrea, and implement it. If that happens, we are lucky. Maybe what the world does with his reputation and his Nobel Peace Prize and what it means, that would be up to history. The second scenario is that he will continue in the path that he is in, using his reputation as a peacemaker internationally, but at the same time, he will continue to create instability within Ethiopia. That's something that the Ethiopians can deal by themselves. But as he continued to create instability in the Horn of Africa, in particular, his target is Eritrea. So if he goes on that dangerous path, only terrible things are down the horizon. And then the third possibility is that it could even get worse than what we have seen so far. So far, we've been judging him because of what he has done. But I think it may be the worst is yet to come. Maybe we have not seen nothing yet, because from the way his ambitious conqueror self talks and describes things, it could really get worse. So again, out of these three, we are hoping for A, the best. We are identifying B as the status quo, that's where we are, and it is not good. And C is the worst. So hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Now, as I conclude my overall message here today, we know the Nobel Peace Prize cannot be revoked. It hasn't in the past, and it won't start with him. So it is his prize to take forever. But the meaning of it, I don't think it's up to him to define what its meaning is. Its meaning definitely is not Abiy Ahmed, the peacemaker that brought peace to the world. Its meaning has changed. And the way we describe the meaning, the way we give it in the context and the narrative is up to all of us. When we do that, it's not to, especially as far as Ethiopia and Eritrea are concerned, he was really welcomed with literally a red carpet and flowers and well wishes, and he was really welcomed, unlike any Ethiopian leader in the past. He was welcomed into Eritrea. But his ambitious plans have nothing to do with making peace with the people of Eritrea or making peace for them. He had bigger plans. Sometimes he talks about that his mother told him that he will be the seventh king of Ethiopia, whatever that means. But an ambitious person who doesn't see the cost of his ambition is a very dangerous person. And at any rate, he should definitely be stopped. And at a minimum, he should not use Eritrea as a scapegoat, as something to blame about Ethiopia's internal politics, internal situation, and something about the relationship between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Eritrea is not to blame. Show me Article 1 and Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, Article 6 of what he literally agreed with Eritrea. And the onus is up to everyone to show it's actually Eritrea, it's actually President Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea who is rescinding on them. In fact, you will see, if you are fair, and this is fact-based, we are making fact-based argument, that at every level, it's the representative Ethiopia Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, he is going against the peace. And the irony is, it's actually him who won the respect and the award and the money and the prize that came with being a peacemaker. But I believe, at least for today's purpose, I have made my case against Abiy Ahmed and whether he deserves this or not. But I am definitely interested in your opinions to see if something could be added or taken away from what I just said. But as always, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and the best way to support this channel is by liking, subscribing, and sharing this, and commenting and engaging with everything that we do. And if you like to see more fact-based analysis like this, please continue to support. For today, thank you for your time.
دابل ولد ولدي الرعيان الخبر حبس بس كتشمع كبد عدي عدي رأي خلاني أنس رأي خلاني الرأي رأي خلاني صباح طيكم تخوني